Excellencies, participants, ladies and gentlemen, may I call the meeting to order? The next speaker is Ms. Anat Ben-Nun, Director of Development and External Relations at Peace Now, Israel's longest-standing movement of the Peace Camp, focusing on public advocacy for peace. Peace Now's Settlement Watch unit comprehensively monitors the expansion and strategies of Israeli settlements in the West Bank. Ms. Ben-Nun was also a former coordinator of the Palestinian-Israeli Peace NGO Forum. With this introduction, I would like to invite Ms. Ben-Nun to deliver her remarks. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the organizers. Thanks for having me here. Before I'll get to the subject matter, I'll just say a few words really about where I come from. Like Danny, I'm also Israeli, and I'm here as a representative of Peace Now. Peace Now is the longest-standing movement for Israeli public pressure for peace. And a couple of decades ago, Peace Now identified settlements as the largest obstacle for a two-state solution. Back then, it established its, what is now its flagship project, Settlement Watch. And what we do is we comprehensively monitor and analyze settlement developments. We do it daily through ground surveys, aerial surveys. We look at plans, tenders, construction on the ground. We check monetary issues. And really, we have become a reliable source of information on all issues relating to settlements. And what we do with this information then is we try to expose it to the Israeli public, which is our main target audience, and also to stakeholders in order for them to basically, first of all, know about these developments that can otherwise really go unnoticed. There's not a lot of transparency around many of these processes. And then, develop a policy, be able to react if it's the Israeli public. And it's important for me to say, really, that we're not just an organization, we're a movement of people. Despite of what you might think here, usually about the Israeli public, there is a large chunk of it that is still supportive of two states and oppose the occupation and oppose the settlements. So just an anecdote about that. Now I want to start in a slightly optimistic note. I know we haven't heard a lot of that. I think I'm not going to disagree with my colleague here, Danny, all that much, but I hope I can add a few important points to his remarks. So according to all of our data, we're seeing that the settler population definitely increased significantly in the last few years, but not in a way that is making the two-state solution impossible. First of all, in recent years, there have been almost no new settlements or outposts. So yes, while there has been an increase in population, the shape of it, the places where the settlements and outposts are located haven't changed to an extent that changes the situation on the ground and prevent the possibility of drawing a border similar to the Geneva line or other similar ideas that we've heard so far. Now, the greatest increase in population was in three major settlements, which are Modi'in Illit, Ma'ale Adumim, and Beitar Illit, all of which are actually west of the Geneva line, meaning that it is likely that they'll be a part of Israel in the framework of an agreement. Now, this is also an issue. Of course, we at Peace Now oppose all settlement building, regardless of whether it's east or west of the Geneva line. I'll get to it a little bit later. But what I'm really saying is that the majority of the increase in population happened in areas that are likely not to be evacuated in the framework of an agreement. And just very briefly, a few words about the numbers that we have about the settler population. I know we heard slightly different information from my colleague Jad, but our information about the numbers is that we have 356,500 settlers in the West Bank currently. We're going to have new numbers very shortly, hopefully within a month. And East Jerusalem, 204, is that right? 203,000 settlers. So this is just about numbers, and our number is the same as Dani's regarding a number of settlers that will be evacuated in the framework of an agreement. It's 150,000, and this is still a number that we see as possible. Not easy, but definitely possible, given Israel's history, both with the disengagement, of course, to a much smaller scale, but also in the sense of absorbing such a large population. You know, we've done much more of that in the 90s during the immigration from the former Soviet Union. A few more words about the two states. I think, you know, based on what I just said, all of those people who were supportive of the two-state solution 15 years ago in Camp David and throughout, you know, the recent efforts, they should not stop believing that it is possible. But I think the reason why they think it's no longer possible is years of maybe failure, but also it's the current lack of political will that we're seeing, definitely on the Israeli side. And I think that we have to remember that, you know, these issues are not permanent. I think that political situations can change, they fluctuate. We've seen so many, you know, things, that unexpected things happening only in the last few years in our region. And political will is something that can change. And despite of the fact that the majority of, despite of the fact that many of the Israeli public have recently shifted to the right, we see this, we cannot ignore this, we see this in our work. Still, we see, according to polls, majority support in the idea of two states. And this comes to show that when there will be political will, the people will stand behind a leader that is willing to give them a final status agreement. Eventually, you know, I think both sides are very much still interested in that point of end of conflict, end of claims. And very briefly, I will skip some of this data, but I will just say that the population that we see as the settler population that will be evacuated in the framework of an agreement comprises only of 1.2% of the entire population of Israelis and Palestinians between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean. And, you know, I think that we shouldn't let, all of us here, shouldn't let 1.2% of the entire population of this region determine the fate of everyone there who wants to live eventually in peace and security. And finally, and probably the most important point on the two-state solution is that this is really, and Dani said this also, I think, the only real possible solution, because it's the only way in which both Palestinians and Israelis will have their right for self-determination fulfilled. I don't see how any other solution really touches the core issue of this conflict and that need for self-determination. Also, the gap between the ideas of what a one-state is among the far right in Israel and the far left, both in Israel and on the Palestinian side, it's so far apart that those ideas can never be breached into something that, you know, all will agree upon. So now, after talking about why the two-state solution is still possible, I want to kind of get down to what's going on the ground. And, you know, we're all seeing the fact that there's no real negotiated agreement in sight. And this really gives us as Peace Now, and also you, I think, an important role of making sure that this solution is still possible when the time is ripe. And the way, and we do it through two major paths. One is on the ground, trying to ensure that that there's still a possibility for a viable Palestinian state alongside Israel. And the other is through our work with the public opinion in Israel, ensuring that the majority support on two-state solution remains. The majority of my presentation now will focus on this first issue and the situation on the ground. I think a lot of it has been mentioned in previous presentations, so I'll try to be brief about those aspects. Here you have a map of the West Bank, and I want to talk about what we see as major threats to the two-state solution. I'll go through it quickly. We're looking at Ariel, E1, East Jerusalem specifically with Givat HaMatos, and Efrat, and the new addition to it, which is called Nachla, E2, or Givat Eitam. All of these areas, developments in all of these areas are dangerous to the two-state solution because really they prevent the possibility for a viable Palestinian state that has not only transportational continuity but also territorial contiguity. We want to make sure that developments don't happen on the ground that separate, for example, the north and the south of the West Bank, or separate Jerusalem from the rest of the West Bank, as will be if there will be developments in the E1 area, for example. Now, I think that the only way, and this is an Israeli interest also, to see a viable Palestinian state that can develop, that has a strong economy, and this will not happen with fragments and little bits of pieces connected with bridges and tunnels. Another issue on the sensitive areas. Earlier I mentioned that the majority of the growth of population happened west of the Geneva line, in what we call the settlement blocks. Now I put this in quotation marks because these are not really blocks, they've never really been defined. But the most important issue to say about the blocks, which are those clusters of settlements that are usually in close proximity to the Green Line, and supposedly parts of them will be in Israel as a part of land swaps, is that these are the most sensitive areas because these are the real areas that are being negotiated over, or that will be negotiated over when negotiations take place. No one imagines, some of the settlements that are at the heart of the West Bank to be negotiated over. It's clear that they're not going to remain. Those most sensitive areas are the areas on the blocks, and that's why while some governments are hearing that there's been developments in the blocks and they're saying, okay, this is not as bad as the isolated settlements. Actually, this is highly sensitive. Just a little bit of information of what's happening now on the ground. In terms of construction, if we drive through the West Bank, we see that settlement construction is happening all over the West Bank, including the sensitive areas of Ariel, Efrat. We see construction sites also in illegal outposts. And so if we look at the information of the Central Bureau of Statistics, we can see that there's been almost doubling of settlement construction in the first quarter of this year as opposed to the respective period of last year. And this may be surprising to some of you who are not hearing as much about tenders, who are not hearing about approval of plans, because like Danny said, this nearly happened since the establishment of this government. But it is important to understand that on the ground things are looking completely differently, and that also there are so many plans that have already been approved that the settlers have much more time before they would really need new plans to be approved. But as Danny said, it is very likely that soon we will see more of those plans being approved. I put here a little point about the retroactive legalization of outposts. This is a real reason for concern. Since 2011, we've seen 25 outposts that are either in the process of being legalized or that have been legalized. And one way of doing it has been through calling them, retroactively legalizing them as neighborhoods of settlements nearby, even though they're not really connected to them. This is a way of avoiding international pressure, because if there was a new settlement, I assume many of you will be raising your voices, and here this is a way of really kind of going under the radar and doing that as quietly as possible. So this is something to be watching for. One other thing I didn't mention before on outposts, I think we were talking about the fact that there's been nearly no new points of settlement. And I just want to say that, between 2005, just to give a little bit of optimism, between 2005 and 2012, there's been no new outposts at all. And this was the result of the Sasson report on the issue of outposts being illegal, of local public pressure, legal struggle of Peace Now and other organizations, and international pressure. And so this is just to say, it's easy to say about how difficult the situation is, but just to show that, with the right combination of local and international pressure, really we see that there are some results. Now, it's important for me to also mention that it's not only about housing units. Again, I think Jad was talking about this earlier as well, so I won't expand too much. But while the entire international community, is used to hearing about plans and tenders, they're not always so aware of other developments that are happening that are also forms ways to expand settlements. And I'll go through them briefly. On the issue of land declaration and allocation, I think enough has been said, so I won't elaborate. I will just say that through petitions to the High Court of peace and human rights organizations, including ours, today it is impossible for settlers to build on private Palestinian land. They know that if they're going to go and build an outpost on illegal Palestinian land, they know they will be evacuated. There is no way around it legally, and I think this is a small achievement, but it is an achievement. And now we are looking at the issue of allocation of state land and trying to see how we can struggle against it both publicly and legally. So this is something that we're currently working on. On the issue of infrastructure is really a way of expanding settlements. Recently, we've heard of approval of bypass roads throughout the West Bank, and those bypass roads that, as they're called, they bypass Palestinians' towns and villages, and allow easier access, let's call it, for settlers. They are the kind of the veins of life for the settlements. Take, for example, the Lieberman Road. The Lieberman Road was already established in 2008. We call it that because this is a road that was built while former Minister of Transportation then, Lieberman, was living in Nokdim. During his time as Minister of Transportation, this road was approved. You can see it as the red line in the map here. And this road really connects the settlements of Tkoa, Nokdim, and other settlements around the area to Jerusalem. And basically what it did is made the trip to Jerusalem be from 40 minutes, it shortened it to 10 minutes. And suddenly those settlements became suburbs of Jerusalem. And as a result, they changed, some of them also changed in the population there as well, because now you can live in the suburbs of Jerusalem. Within 10 minutes, you're in the city center, and you can live in a nice house and have a yard and pay, maybe 3 times less. And what we also saw is that as the suburbization, let's call it, of this its settlements resulted from the construction of this road, there was a 70% increase in the population in the settlements around this road. So roads are really a critical development to pay attention to. Finally, there's the issue of ideological tourism. And while this might not lead to settlement expansion, this works on the hearts and minds of the Israeli public. What the settlers are trying to do through ideological tourism is to strengthen the Jewish national and religious sentiments towards those areas. Take, for example, the area of the Tel Shiloh area. Recently, the government has invested 20 million shekels there in a big visitor center, and there's also an archaeological site there. And now, the Israeli public just goes to see the sites, to learn more. There's groups of Israeli students that are being sent to those areas. And what will happen is that when, in the future we will say that, of course, Shiloh is, very isolated, not at all a part of an agreement, Israelis will say, well, we've been there, we've seen it, it's a part of Israel, how can we give it up? So this is another effort by the settlers to kind of connect the Israeli public to areas that, yes, they have a connection to the Jewish history, but it doesn't necessarily mean we need sovereignty over those areas, of course. So this is a part of the Israelization, what we call, of the West Bank. Another important point to look at. Now, finally, just a few words about what we're doing with all of this information. And many in the Israeli public don't have no idea about maybe half of what we have discussed, maybe even more, unfortunately. And our goal really is to bring this information to the Israeli public, to educate them about what's going on beyond the Green Line, because many of them have never been, many of them never learned about it, they don't know about it. And so we try to educate them, we talk to youth groups, we do lectures, we do debates, we try to create a public debate on those issues. We do it through the media, through social media, and also through direct action, so through demonstrations and other forms of direct action. And finally, we have a legal struggle that is usually, we try to take cases that create precedents, so really have a strong impact, but also cases that the Israeli public will be interested in and create a public struggle alongside the legal struggle. So these are generally our efforts, and this is just to show again that we're not just an organization, we're a movement. There is a strong constituency that is anti-occupation in Israel. We're definitely not the majority, far from it. We're not as strong maybe as we were before. The struggle is difficult, but we have to keep going. And I think really having said what I said earlier about the two-state solution not being permanent, but still being possible, I think we have an important role to play in the Israeli public. Thank you.